This video was recorded at the TACA National Conference. Be sure to attend the next National Conference, October 20th through 22nd, 2017, in Costa Mesa, California. For more information, visit tacanow.org.
Hello. I have a cardinal rule that is being broken right now. And that is when you eat, you're supposed to only eat. So sorry about that. But hopefully you're going to have good energy and good vibes, and that parasympathetic nervous system is going to allow you to digest your food very well, right? So that is one of my... I have a lot of pet peeves, my kids will tell you, so will my wife. But my goal for today is to answer your questions. So this slide is here to help guide you, not confuse you or scare you. Because really, when you look at this, where do you start? So when I first started, I found that little gene on the bottom in the research called MTHFR, and that's where I began. And I worked with patients. Some got better, some had no change, some got a lot worse. And I was like, well, why is that? And then I realized that the MTHFR wasn't the only gene in the human body, that there was another one, and then another one, and another one, and I started piecing them together. And then I unleashed Pandora's box, which I now lecture around the world, confusing everybody else, not just me. So really, where to start is important, because autism, as you all know, is a multifaceted, complex condition, right? You work on the gut. Dr. Anju Usman is an amazing magician with the gut. Gut is huge. And then you go to some other doctor, and they work on the mitochondria. Then you go to other one, you get a SPECT scan from Dr. Amen. And you get all these pieces. And then you get this, at the same time you're working on the pieces, you get this amplitude of improvement and regression, and you hope the improvement slide keeps going up. But sometimes it really stays down for a while. And so that is what makes autism so difficult, because it is a spectrum. So when you're looking at a diagram like this, and this is what I teach doctors around the world on, and now laypersons, because frankly, what do you call a medical student who graduates at the bottom of their class? A doctor. How many times have you been more educated than your own doctor? It's scary. So it is actually you who's transforming medicine by pushing them and keeping to push. And just like Dr. Amen asked the other doctor, can you read? And yes, they can read, but they don't. And not to go on too much of a tangent, but a lot of doctors got in the business to heal, and it's not really their fault, because it's the whole paradigm that sucks. So, questions. You have note cards. Please write your questions down, and I will tell you a few things where I strongly believe you should start, and I think you know it already. And it's what your grandmother told you. Exercise, go to bed on time, read books, hang out with your family and friends, eat the right foods if you can find real food. These things are all the basics that you already know, that you just, and most of you already have the discipline to do it, but you need to maintain that discipline. I told one of my employees, I asked him, I said, are you gluten-free? He goes, about 80%. I said, that's 0%. So you have to be diligent about it. I know it's tough. I've been gluten-free for years now. So my whole family. So questions, keep them coming in. But what I want to show you here, look at the top. This is big. Right here, FOLR1, that's a folate receptor. That binds folate. Folate is used heavily by the body. I didn't say folic acid, I said folate. Folic acid is trash. That's where it belongs. Folate. Purple slows these things down. Look at that term right there, dairy antibodies. How many of you see amazing result when you remove dairy from your kids' diet and your diet? Now, this is one contributing cause why dairy is a problem. It's not the only one, right? There's many other reasons why dairy, casein is also a problem. But dairy antibodies will bind to the folate receptor and prevent the folate from binding to it and getting into the cell. So while you are taking folate, IV or in food or what have you, but yet the child or you are consuming dairy and you have antibodies against it, it doesn't matter. You have a functional deficiency. Lab might show that your folate's fine, but functionally, your cell is deficient because the cell is trying to bind the folate to the receptor and get it inside the cell. So dairy, removal of dairy is important. So diet, as has already been told. Folic acid also binds preferentially to these receptors, and it slows these other ones down. And then there's another one, folic acid actually slows MTHFR down. There's a lot of research on folic acid saying it's beneficial. There's very little research that shows that it's harmful. I have to dig. And on YouTube, there's a talk which I've done called Folic Acid is Adversely Affecting You. It's free. It's a nerd fest. But I provide the science and the research. I show the actual studies and I discuss them. So, because folic acid, you really need to get that out of your system. When I surveyed a lot of people who studied my videos on YouTube, I asked them, what is one of the main interventions that you have done that has made the most impact? Not taking folic acid. Now, that's like sacrilege, right? That's controversial. That's something that you should not be saying. I am saying it, and I have plenty of evidence to show that it is wrong. So remove folic acid, remove dairy, and then if you look at other things here, look at this. These all slow down this main enzyme right here, which is extremely important. Acetaldehyde comes from what? Yeast and alcohol. Healing the gut. I have MTHFR myself, and I would drink with my college buddies back in the day, and I would feel horrible. And I couldn't do it. So I removed it. So what I'm saying where to start, you remove the purple things. You get rid of them. The things that you know about, lead, mercury, hydrogen peroxide. What gets rid of hydrogen peroxide in the body? Glutathione. Glutathione, I know a lot of you are using, some successfully, some not. Electrolytes. I was talking with a lady earlier today, and she told me about how she was using folates in her kid, and a lot of people tell me that they use folates and they get worse. How many of you have used methylfolate and seen your child get much worse? Raise your hands. Hold them high. How many of you have seen significant improvement? Okay. So for those of you who are brave enough, I see you 50-50. And there's reasons for that. So before I introduce folate to a child or an adult, there's basics that have to be done. Electrolytes is one. Electrolytes are really, really important. Potassium is extremely important. Sodium is talked about all the time, which is also important. Potassium is undervalued. And that doesn't mean go out and eat a bunch of bananas, because bananas can actually make your kids bananas because they're highly glycemic and they're potentially high histamine. And histamine can cause problems. So basics, work with the gut, be super diligent about gluten-free and dairy-free. Absolutely diligent. I know it's tough. I have a family of 3 boys and my wife. You gotta keep it 100% on point. And don't allow you or somebody in your family to say, oh, you can eat it, while the others don't. My oldest son can tolerate dairy. He can't. I'll give him that. When he brings it to the house, I put it in the garbage can. It's not fair to anybody else in the family. Who saunas? Sauna is really, really, really important. I have a video for free on YouTube on how to sauna. It's not easy. When I first got into sauna, I was really sick. I was in there for about 30 seconds and I got way worse. But sauna is extremely useful. And yes, kids can sauna correctly. Put them on the floor, not because they're younger and you're being mean, but because it's not as hot. Low temperature saunas, longer duration is useful. I'm very pro sauna. Basics, filtration. You suck in air all day, all night. Filter your air. The environment is hugely important. So again, remove the purples. You see here, organophosphates. Organophosphates come from where? Pesticides. Everywhere. Schools, playgrounds, your own home, your garage, your neighbor's garage, your neighbor. Air. It's everywhere. So removal, identification, and being aware. Washing your kids' hands after they come home from the park. Taking your shoes off before you enter the home. They had an article, what was it, in the New York Times, that said, I'm a doctor and I eat food that falls on the ground, right? You guys see that? And what was the food that fell on the floor? Potato chips. That was the picture. So food that falls on the floor, if it's a clean floor. Bugs are okay, healthy bugs, but not organophosphates. This enzyme right here is extremely important, and it's slowed by organophosphates, which come from pesticides. This enzyme's function is to turn an RNA-based uracil into a DNA base of thymine. Science doesn't matter here. What matters is that you understand that your child or yourself cannot have healthy cells without this enzyme working. And if you're taking all the folate you want, but you're consuming non-organic food, that's a problem. Dirty Dozen on Environmental Working Group, extremely important. So I'm a huge environmental proponent. I donate to the Environmental Working Group. I've been following them for a long time. I highly encourage you to go to ewg.org. There's another website, scorecard.org. Who knows Scorecard? Amazing, scary, but informative. Scorecard.org, what you do is you type in your zip code of where you are currently and where you grew up, and you can see who the top polluters are in that zip code and the top chemicals that are being released, and then you go to Google and you find out what those chemicals do. So I've had many a patient who said, I have this rare form of leukemia, blood leukemia, and I go on there and there's this huge level of a chemical that is known to cause leukemias in their particular zip code. My treatment, move. So it's tough, but you do sometimes have to lift your roots and replant them elsewhere. Who has done that with mold or other reasons? It's the only way out, right? Sometimes you have to change your environment to thrive at times. Okay, so questions. Man, some of you must be doctors or I can't. All right. Okay, so I love this question because it's a brilliant example of what I'll be teaching you guys, hopefully, of what not to do. My daughter is an adopted drug baby, now 22 years old. Congratulations for adopting your child. It's awesome. Tested for SNPs. We have homozygous BHMT 248 MTR, so on and so on. Okay. Many of you have seen my work on YouTube. How would I answer this question? Don't treat the SNP. I was talking with another mother here today. Identical twins, absolutely identical, totally different. So I could have the same SNPs as your adopted child, but be completely different. What's the main history here that overpowers the SNPs? Drugs, right? Drugs. What did they do to the genetics? That's why I made this slide the way I do it. It's because the epigenetic controls outweigh the SNP. I felt terribly with alcohol. I was producing a lot of acetaldehyde. I have MTHFR. What did I do? I removed the alcohol. So don't treat the SNP. And frankly, I have a research team that helps me research. And my research team has looked at over 500 genetic polymorphisms. We've only put in 50 that meet our criteria to be clinically relevant. There is a lot of noise in your genetic reports. There's a lot of stuff that scares you. There's a lot of stuff that wastes your time. There's a lot of stuff that's meaningless. There's 1.4 million SNPs in the human body. Most are benign. Most are benign. Are de novo mutations in autism reversible? That is a question that I don't think anyone can answer. So basically, de novo mutation means you have a gene, and you're born with that gene working well, and then it becomes mutated. And most genetic testing looks at germ cells. Cancer testing probably does isolate certain genes in the area. I'm not an oncologist. I don't want to speak those things. But I will say that you can switch genetic function and epigenetics, which is what epigenetics is. So if there is a de novo mutation, and that happens because of various reasons, but you remove organophosphates, you're able to make your DNA bases so that your DNA can then work. If you do not have adequate folate, or you have things like organophosphates messing with them, then that DNA is going to have RNA in it. And is that good? No. I did not notice any difference in my son when we stopped dairy, which was raw goat milk, and organic cheese. Is he still being harmed by not removing dairy? This is a tough question because I don't know if it's organic goat cheese or if it's cow cheese, and then also it's cheese. Cheese is high in histamine. Histamine can cause a lot of problems. Histamine is very useful in the gut because histamine causes motility. It also supports, keeps inflammation in check. So having histamine is good, but having too much histamine is not. It can actually contribute to leaky gut. There's probiotics, as many of you know, that also increase histamine. So cheese is very histaminic, especially the older the cheese, the more it is. Let me give you an example. My son, who was about 3 at the time, he has similar genetics. And by the way, this is one of my boys here. And not the one I'm talking about, but he was 4 and he had this chronic, you guys done eating? Okay. He had this chronic runny nose, and I was sick of staring at it. And so I got down on my knees and I said, Matthew, do you want your runny nose to go away? He goes, yeah. I said, I think dairy is contributing to your runny nose. And you get really mad, too, when you eat cheese. I mean, you get really mad. Do you notice that? Yeah. I don't know if he actually did, but he said, yeah. But he wanted that runny nose to go away. I said, would you want to stop eating cheese and milk for 2 weeks to see if the problem goes away? Sure. We did it. Runny nose went away. Gone. Moods more stable. After 2 weeks, I said, hey, look at your nose. How you doing? Great. How's your mood? Good. I don't know. But, he can't relate to that probably. But his runny nose, he could. I said, do you want some cheese? He goes, yeah. I was like, damn. So I gave him cheese. Literally, in about 10 to 15 minutes, faucet turned on, and about another 20 minutes later, he was a punk. Sweetest kid, right? How many of you times have you worked with yourself or your own child and you introduced a food or you gave a supplement and they were just awesome? It was one of those amazing days and it just went to, went south fast, right? Happens quickly. Pinpointed the dairy, he hasn't been touching it since. And he's now 10 years old. And he purposely avoids dairy himself. Okay? So that's what you want to do. You want to show the child and yourself the impact that food has. And if you do it one at a time, and you do it right, 100%. He didn't get cheese for dinner one out of those 2 weeks. I mean, he was completely avoiding it. His dad is a tyrant about that. But you have to be. And you get them on board. So I would try it again, and I would remove all dairy completely. And then I would try the cheese in isolation, or I'd try strawberries, or I'd try bananas, or any other high histamine containing food, and see what happens. How do I feel about high-dose folinic acid for kids with autism? So to get you on board with this, folinic acid is right here. 5-formyl THF is folinic acid. And what happens if you give folic acid as recommended by the public health and all these organizations trying to reduce neural tube defects? You're slowing these genes down, and it can't get through very well with so many known genetic polymorphisms. These are not rare. That's why my team selected them. These genetic polymorphisms are common, extremely common. This variant reduces its function by 43%. Only 200 micrograms of folic acid can get through this gene, if it's working. So then you add an MTHFR and these other ones, you get a problem. So folinic acid is here, so vitamin B6 works with that as well. So folinic acid is, I think it's very useful. But it won't be useful if their electrolytes aren't working. So you have to get adequate electrolytes. You need to support their mitochondria a little bit. Phosphatidylcholine is a huge one for me, extremely important as well. But be careful with phosphatidylcholine too, it's powerful. How does folinic acid affect methylation? You mentioned it slowing SHMT and impacting glycine and serine. Yes. So I will be talking about this tomorrow. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty because I have a good step-by-step process to teach you how to use this thing. This is more for reference. I don't want to overwhelm you right now. But yes, if you give folinic acid, you can, I wouldn't say slow SHMT, you can serve it. And I'll discuss that tomorrow. Would I recommend monitoring anything specific for a child using high-dose folinic acid? Yeah, I would. There are labs out there that look at what's called folate derivatives, folinic acid, methylfolate, unmetabolized folic acid, which is a fancy word of saying folic acid. It's the same thing, because folic acid physiologically doesn't do anything in the human body unless it gets transformed. It has no physical function in the body, physiological function, until it gets processed. Okay? It doesn't do anything. So tests can show folic acid, methylfolate, and folinic acid. The problem is, I don't know how accurate they are. So you can spend money and time and stab your child to get those levels and to see. But I would just monitor symptoms. Frankly, I just monitor symptoms. If they're doing well with it, great. If they're not, reduce it. Now, I have a story about this, and it's really important. I have a lot of stories. A medical doctor called me up years ago, and he was frantic. He goes, I have a daughter who's been beating me and my wife up for years. And she's been kicked out of all these institutions, and this is the last one that's near our home. If she gets kicked out of here, we're in trouble because we have no other institution left because she was beating up the nurses and the doctors. And I said, my first question was, when was the last time she felt good? And he goes, about 2 months ago. I said, what happened? He goes, well, she was on this dose of folinic acid, this dose of methylfolate. And I said, what is she on now? Well, she's on 3 times the dose. I said, so she was on 2 milligrams of folinic, 2 milligrams of methylfolate, and now she's on 6 and 6? He goes, yeah. I said, well, don't you think therein lies the problem? And he goes, no. I said, why not? He goes, because we ordered a lab, and it showed that her folinic acid and her methylfolate levels are low. Don't trust a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper. Trust what is sitting in front of you. Pieces of papers in labs are useful, but not always. And this is a powerful reminder to not trust labs. So kudos to the MD for being integrative and forward-thinking, but not kudos for ignoring the fact that his daughter was doing exceptionally well on 2 milligrams of both. So we got her back down to 2 milligrams, and she was doing much better. So don't trust labs all the time. You have to think through. Are there different forms of methylated folic acid, and which is best? So I have a lot of videos on YouTube you can watch for these, but here's methylated folate right here. And there's a video that I've done called L-methylfolate. And on the title of that video, I have all the different ways you can say methylfolate. It's 5-MTHF, L-methylfolate, L5-methylfolate, L5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, L5 or 6S5 quatropholeic. So they're all good for the most part. Quatropholeic is made by a company called Gnosis out of Italy. That's the one I personally prefer. There's another one that's made by Merck called it's bound to calcium, and that's metafolin. But metafolin and quatropholeic are both useful. What about hot yoga? Awesome. Hot yoga is great. But anything, I think exercise is awesome. But how many of you have exercised and done something too long and you've actually depleted yourself and made yourself worse? Okay? It's very common. I've worked with elite athletes. I was a college athlete myself, and University of Washington rowing, which is a very demanding sport, and I hear it all the time. Exercise is fantastic, but you have to know what your limit is. Don't be macho and go past it. So you have to tune in. Are you feeling tired? If you're feeling tired, slow down, take a rest. Doing hot yoga every single day and you feeling tired the next day and you're like, oh, I've got to go to hot yoga. No, take a rest, take a break. So I believe in moderation. And make sure you get your electrolytes. Also, hot yoga, you are anything that's stimulating hyperthermia, you are mobilizing solvents from fat and getting it in your circulation. So if your detoxification systems aren't up to speed and you're mobilizing nasty solvents and metals from your fats, they're going to get into your blood. And if you feel worse after sauna or hot yoga or anything that is inducing sweat, you need to tune into that and support your detoxification systems faster. There are a lot of people that have genetics that predispose them to faster phase 1 detoxification, which is highly oxidative stress on the system. It's a lot of stress on the system. So if you have a fast phase 1 detoxification system and a slow phase 2, that can be a problem. I've seen it all the time. Hot yoga is great because you're stimulating a lot of phase 2 with sweating, but you also need to just make sure you have those nutrients on board. I had an allergic reaction to IV glutathione. Okay. Now, I question, are you sure it was an allergic reaction or not just a reaction? I don't have it here, but I'll show it to you tomorrow. I don't want to dig through these slides too much. But glutathione is a sulfur compound. And glutathione is extremely potent. There's a lot of reasons why someone could be having a quote-unquote allergic reaction. But it also could be increasing cysteine levels. And cysteine can go to sulfites. And sulfites cause allergic reactions. They cause asthma. They cause itchiness. They cause hyperexcitability in the brain. They cause a lot of problems. So if you take anything sulfur and you feel worse, molybdenum, a mineral that nobody can say well, molybdenum, M-O-L-Y-B-D-E-N-U-M, can be a game changer. But just keep in mind, it's also going to be the same thing for eggs. So if you eat eggs or cruciferous vegetables and you feel worse, feel sluggish, it could be that you're deficient in molybdenum, increasing your sulfites, because molybdenum helps convert sulfite to sulfate. But it also could be that sulfur is becoming more oxidized because your detoxification system is not working well, and of other reasons. Would I add a potassium supplement or add certain foods? So I talked with Dr. David Quigg. He's the Chief Scientific Officer of Doctors Data. They have a glutathione lab, and brilliant man. And I asked him, when you're working with doctors and they're sending in labs, what do you like seeing better? What are you seeing better on these labs for raising glutathione? He goes, IV works great, but it's in the system for 12 minutes. It's done. So liposomal glutathione, he prefers. He doesn't know about creams, and he doesn't like oral capsule glutathione. So potassium is a useful nutrient. That could be one thing to consider, but I would actually consider molybdenum, and I'd be careful with IV glutathione. I much prefer titrating slower up. What type of air filter should I buy? A good one. There are a lot of them out there, not to be cheeky, but I think Pure Air, if I'm recollecting that name properly, they exhibit at our conferences, and they filter the air for us. At my conferences, we filter the air. We have gluten-free, dairy-free, filtered water. It's pretty cool. But Pure Air is good. You've got IQ is decent. You've got Allen Air. There's quite a number out there that are good. Make sure that they deal with molds, too. Mold is real. Oh. I'm preparing myself. What B12 for COMT++? Avoid methyl B12. I love the internet. I really do. And I also hate it. Hate's a strong word, so I don't like it. But B12 for ++. Do we treat the SNP? No. COMT is a gene that helps metabolize estrogens, dopamine, norepinephrines. It's very important. You cannot base a supplement recommendation on a SNP. You can't. If you have MTHFR, do you supplement with methylfolate? Well, that one's pretty easy, but you can. But what if they're already eating leafy greens? Maybe they don't need it, right? And to support that, I'll get back to the COMT in a second. They looked at Italians. Italians are very high in MTHFR 677. They have a homozygous variant of this gene, which reduces their ability to make this compound right here by about 80%. So that means they have about 80% less of methylfolate compared to someone who doesn't. But what if they eat leafy greens? Because look, methylfolate comes from, salad. Italians who have homozygous MTHFR, they're not taking folic acid, and they don't have kids with neural tube defects. Italians who are homozygous MTHFR C677 don't have children with neural tube defects. Hispanics and Caucasians in America continent, American continent, do have neural tube defects when they have MTHFR. Environment is key. Diet is key. Talk about this all the time. COMT, I've had great success with methyl for some people. I've had great success with hydroxo. I've had great success with adeno. It depends on the patient. It depends on you and the child. So there's a video on YouTube again where I discuss the various forms of B12. Quickly, adenosylcobalamin supports the mitochondria. If you run a lab on yourself and your urinary methylmalonic acid is high, or you're getting fatigue from exercise, adenosylcobalamin can be needed and used. If you have elevated hydrogen sulfide, and how would you know that? But if you stink like sulfur, or sulfur doesn't work very well for you, or you have chronic disease, hydroxycobalamin can be useful. Hydroxycobalamin is researched to lower hydrogen sulfide levels and nitric oxide levels. And nitric oxide can be very inflammatory. Methylcobalamin supports methylation. So if you need methylation support, then you use methylcobalamin. But you can also use hydroxycobalamin to support methylation too. The body will methylate it, hopefully. So you just need to try. Does MTHFR cause hypokalemia? Interesting question. Also, and if so, how do you go about healing the MTHFR to cause a hypokalemia? I have not seen any research that links MTHFR to hypokalemia, which is low blood potassium. But what I will say is when you are introducing folates, methylfolate and folinic acid into the cell, I learned this from he wasn't a doctor, but he was brilliant like one, Rich van Kooijenberg, brilliant man. And he's passed away, unfortunately. Lost a great researcher. But if you are supporting folate, and folate supports cell division, and you have low potassium, what's going to happen? So for example, if I have 10 glasses of water, let me think of an example here. If you have cells that are already deficient in potassium, and you support methylation and folates increase the number of cells in your body, right? They increase the number of these. What's going to happen to that cellular level of potassium as new cells are made? It's going to go down even more, right? So if you support someone's MTHFR or their folate pathways without supporting their potassium levels, you are going to make them more deficient in that nutrient. Make sense? Potassium is a game changer for a lot of people. And coconut water is useful for potassium, but coconut water is also very high in carbohydrate. Very high in carbohydrate. And excess carbohydrates put a burden on the liver and a burden on the system and also cause inflammation. That sugar has to go somewhere. And it's not just fat, it's oxidative stress and damage. So the way I treat hypokalemia is by looking at the reasons why it's there and replenishing with potassium and replenishing the problems. What do I recommend for a gluten infraction? A ticket. A big ticket and post it on the wall. No, gluten infraction. Sodium bicarbonate. So if you, or potassium bicarbonate. So I learned this from Dr. Bill Ray, one of the leading clinical ecologists ever. And he practices down in Dallas, Texas. And if a person has a reaction to a food, if you give them bicarb, it can neutralize it. Now, not always, but it can be useful, and it's not known very much. Environmental medicine doctors have some good tricks. I'd also look at enzymes to digest the gluten as well, which are out there. My son becomes very stimmy within 10 minutes of eating any meal. Wow. We have tested many foods, and he's off of many foods. Could something be going on in the gut that makes him stimmy from eating anything? You guys can answer that, right? What's the answer to that? A resounding yes. Now, before I move on to this, if you are eating or your child is eating foods and they react to a multitude of them, it's gut. It's gut. If they're reacting to one or two, it could be the food, or it could be what's in that constituent of that food. But if you get an allergy test back, or you just can't tolerate a bunch of foods, it's the gut. And what is commonly missed, I will call it SIBO. Who's heard of SIBO? Everyone now. I think small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is a result of a metabolic and methylation dysfunction. It's not a result of having too much bacteria in the small intestine. Why would someone have small bacteria in this? Why would people have bacteria and overgrowth in their small intestine? Why? Motility has been talked about. Antibiotics have been talked about. But nobody's talking about gallbladder and bile. Where does 70% of methylation go to produce two things? Phosphatidylcholine and creatine. Are healthy babies born skinny and weak and floppy? Dr. Amen just talked about a floppy baby. Low muscle tone, speech delay. Also common in autism, right? Creatine is heavily associated with speech delay. There's an enzyme, GAMT, that uses methylation to make creatine. If your child was born low birth weight, weak, failure to thrive, creatine could be a game changer. Start low, work with your doctor. If there's no kidney disease, that creatine can be a game changer. This is even known by the Mayo Clinic. GAMT is a common genetic polymorphism, but it doesn't matter if there's genetic polymorphism or not. You can still have a creatine deficiency functionally. So I think giving creatine could be a game changer. But going back to the gallbladder, there's so much information to give you guys. The gallbladder squirts out bile. Who knows that bile kills bacteria? Exactly. Bile is a known antimicrobial. So if there's a ton of bad pathogens in the small intestine, it could be because the bile is not getting out and dumping into the small intestine and killing those little bastards. Excuse me. So phosphatidylcholine is another one of the interventions that's really useful. Also, visceral manipulation is a very subtle, calming way to work with the gallbladder and remove that stasis and blockage. So I would work with identifying a visceral manipulation therapist in your area and do it on yourself and your child, and you can quickly feel an improvement. If you get nauseated and kind of vomity feeling, that's a good thing, because that means the bile is getting out. So I think SIBO is a consequence. One of them is lack of liver function. Am I running out of time? I'm seeing the wolves.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing before I give up the podium, if I may. So I made a video for you guys called The Fundamentals of Autism. You will text 44222. So text that number, and what you will text is TACA 16, TACA 16. 44222. And when you go in and out of the text area, you text in TACA 16. We will send you a video to your email that you provide, and it's completely free, and it will give you my perspectives of what autism is and how we should approach it, because I don't have time. That's not my role here at TACA. My role is to teach you guys about genetics, so I'll be doing that tomorrow. And Learn more at our booth, just directly out in the back at Seeking Health and Seeking Health Educational Institute. And we have tons of free videos on YouTube. And if you missed our Facebook Live, go to the TACA Facebook and watch that. That was pretty informative for people too. So thank you.
This video was recorded at the TACA National Conference. Be sure to attend the next national conference, October 20th through 22nd, 2017, in Costa Mesa, California. For more information, visit tacanow.org.